Hey guys, it's Mr. Craw, and today we're going to review what time signatures mean in terms of both the top and the bottom number, and we're going to talk about a brand new time signature, which is 3/8 time. So to prepare you for this 3/8 time, let's just look at a common time signature we've seen before, which is 3/4 time. And I think most people know this already. The top 3 means there are 3 beats in each measure, and the bottom 4 tells us that the quarter note equals 1 beat. Now the problem is that a lot of people don't really understand what this bottom 4 really means. Why does a 4 mean that a quarter note equals 1? So if you think of this time signature 3/4, instead of a time signature, if you think of it as a fraction, you would draw it like this. And if you think about how you say this fraction, you'd say 3/4. 3/4. Now, this word fourth is kind of funny because it actually has a synonym. Instead of calling our particular rhythm a fourth note, you know that it is really called a quarter note. So it's a little bit confusing because we say 3/4, we could say 3/4. Now, if you did say 3/4, it makes it really obvious that we're talking about 3 quarter notes per measure. So the trick really to time signatures is just turning it into a fraction and thinking of the top number as the beats and the bottom number as what gets the beat. Don't forget that your rhythm tree is affected by the bottom number. So if the quarter note equals 1 in 4/4 time, then a half note has to equal 2, a whole note has to equal 4, an eighth note has to equal a half. Let's take a look at a different time signature. This is cut time, also can be written as 2/2 time. Now this one's kind of tricky if you turn it into a fraction. How do you say that fraction? 2 halves. Not 2 tooths, not 2 seconds, 2 halves. So really this time signature means that there are 2 half notes per measure, and the half note equals 1. 2 halves. Again, our rhythm tree is affected by that bottom number. Since the half note equals 1, whole note equals 2, quarter note equals 1/2, eighth note, if you even have any eighth notes, would be a fourth of a beat. So on to our new time signature with an 8 on the bottom. So let's just use what we just learned about in 3/4 and 2/2 time and apply that in 3/8. First step, turn it into a fraction. Name the fraction. 3/8. That's a really easy one because we definitely have eighth notes. So this time signature means that there are 3 beats per measure, and the eighth note gets the count. And then once again, we have to figure out all of our rhythms because our rhythm tree has changed since the eighth note is 1. We still keep the relationship with all of our other rhythms. So if an eighth note equals 1, quarter note is double that, 2. Half note is double a quarter, 4. And a whole note is double a half note, or 8 times as long as an eighth note, 8. Now, it's important to note that in 3/8 time, it's not actually possible to have either a half note or an eighth note because there's only 3 beats possible in each measure. Now, you are going to come across a couple of rhythms that are not on our rhythm tree, some dotted rhythms that you're going to need to know about. You can see a lot of dotted quarters, and you can either figure that out by saying, okay, a quarter note's worth 2, and a dot is worth half of that, which is 1, so that must equal 3. Or if you remember previously, our dotted quarter notes were worth 1.5. Now you're going to basically be doubling that, and twice 1.5 is 3. You're also possibly going to see some dotted half notes. Now again, this isn't going to be possible in 3/8 time, but it might be possible in 6/8 or higher. And a dotted half note, again, half note normally worth 4. Half of 4 is 2, and so a dotted half note is worth a total of 6 beats. You'd only be able to see that rhythm in 6/8 time or higher, 6/8, 7/8, 8/8, 9/8. So the main idea here in anything with an 8 on the bottom is that from what you're used to, you're probably going to need to look at all of your rhythms and just play them twice as long as what you're used to. Now I do want to warn you that not too far in the future, we're going to change this definition of 3/8. In fact, we're going to do something completely different with time signatures, where this bottom 8 doesn't mean that the 8th note gets 1. In fact, that bottom 8 is going to mean eventually down the road that a dotted quarter note equals 1. And that completely defies logic. That's going to be coming up in a couple weeks. I'll make a separate video about that. But I do want you to understand that pretty soon we're going to be changing this pretty easy definition of 3/8 into something that's a little trickier. Well, we'll talk about that later. Don't worry about that right now.